All right. So one of the questions that you guys may have is who's controlling the reparations talk in America these days? And it has to be foundational Black Americans, especially those who operate and are concentrated in the reparations space. Now that the energy has been charged into the communities, we see that there's a California reparation task force. Um, if we keep putting the pressure on the system, then the system will break. We understand that our founding fathers, our ancestors right here in America have put pressure on the system for a long time for us to enjoy some of the freedoms as a so-called dominant society has for quite some time now. So the question is, those who may be foundation Black Americans who are against reparation, I do not understand your mindset. I don't believe you know your own history, especially the late history of Dr. Martin Luther King, for which you guys rest a lot of your energy and talk points based upon. But reparations, we understand that the conversation has been moving steadily and forward for the past 3 years now, especially as we get into the era of Joe Biden and leave the era of Trump. Neither one is good for foundational Black American, and neither one has done anything significant to support foundational Black Americans, U.S. melanated freedmen. It doesn't matter. But they've done everything else for other groups. And I'm not going to give you a whole laundry list of things. I know a lot of you guys know, but the two things that we can agree on, family, is the war in Ukraine and illegal immigration that the Biden administration has been supporting even before he came president. He told us that immigrants are the future of America. But we're going to run down a couple of things here, family, because I think it's important to give you context when it comes to this very, very delicate, precious, and powerful movement that we have going on today. Now, we all familiar with antebellum slavery, where it was existed mostly in the South, but they had slaves in the North. There were slaves all across America. And they said that Black Americans were enslaved on small farms, large plantations in cities and towns, inside homes, out in fields and industry and transportation. Who built the railroad? A lot of you may hear that the Chinese built the railroad, but what they do not tell you, almost 100 years before the Chinese came over here to assist our ancestors in the Black American space to build the railroad, the foundation, the ditches, the roads, the trenches, where those tracks are even to this day, our ancestors built it. And again, this is not a debate. This is facts. This is proof. It doesn't matter where you go. But let me move on. Remember the movie Alice? Alice is a movie that already came out, and it starred Keke Palmer. It states here as a Black enslaved woman who escapes and finds out she's transported to the year 1973. So, family, even though systematic slavery ended in America in 1865, slavery was still in America unofficially in the 1970s, family. Up until the 1970s, they had people who were on these little small plantations where they believed that they were still enslaved because their ancestors before that ancestor, so on and so forth, were enslaved the entire time up until the 1970s. Even though other Black people were free, you need to go out and watch the movie. It's mind-blowing, especially go and research and do the history. Up until the 1970s, they had slavery in America. In the 1970s, we had brothers and sisters that didn't even know about electricity in the 1970s. This is all these people knew. And if you watch that movie, hopefully it motivates you to actually go and do the research and read a little bit more about it. But anyway, there's a candidate Powerful, absolutely powerful. But what's important about that? In order to win the black vote, you have to start sounding like black people. You have to start saying the same things up that black people are saying. That means you start hanging around black people. You start inviting black people over to your home, because this political campaign of any candidate starts years in advance on a really grassroots level, where they start coming into your neighborhood, they marching and throwing the fist up, they're giving out fish fries and Gatorades. They even may put on some Chuck Tellers and do a jig here and there. But they start these campaigns years in advance. This is very well calculated how white candidates win the black vote. Joe Biden said there's no way in hell I'm going to win the black vote without a melanated sister or someone whom seems to be black or melanated. So he used Kamala Harris. Do you guys really believe that you would have voted for Joe Biden without Kamala Harris? For you Negroes who did, and we still haven't received anything, but you know that you wouldn't have. She was the deciding factor in the black community to get the black vote, and it worked. And it worked because a lot of us simply vote on color, right? Not policy. Because we have quite a few coons and Sambos in the Foundation of Black American space as well. You know that we do. So we got to call them out, and we have to see what is their agenda, what is their angle. Have they been corrupted? Are they co-opted? Are they a quote unquote agent of sorts? Because every movement that Black Americans have had in this country, there has been agents in this space monitoring, reconning, taking notes. And then when the moment seemed just right, the white supremacy society used those same agents to assassinate our leaders. So guess what happened? We started to think on a much broader scale. We don't have any more leaders. We have master teachers. We have people with certain platforms that push certain information to the Black community, but there are no leaders. You want to call us a monolith? Sure, we're a monolith. We're all Black. That's our monolith. And we all are owed, not deserve, not asking, we're all owed reparations. And reparations are not all these symbolizing things that you may come up with. An apology. Hell no. Put your apology in your pocket and sit on it. Cash payments. But you have someone like Marianne Williamson to come along and they talk the talk. They seem as though they're walking the walk. But the one thing that the dominant society has used against Black people ever since the 60s is the power of comprehension. The etymology of words, the power of comprehension, your vernacular, your vocabulary, your lexicon, all of these things that we use for language. Let me tell you this. I did the research, and I want you to be a part of it. And I want you to hear some of the same things I've heard from Marianne Williamson. And let's just go over about what you think about it. Let me know.
Democrats don't start saying it, then why would those people feel that they're there for us? And if those people don't feel it, they won't vote for us, and Donald Trump will win.
Thank you very much, Ms. Williamson.
Thank you.
You're going to hear a little bit of preaching and teaching here. Marianne Williamson, by the way, is 70 years of age. Just for context.
Have communities, particularly communities of color and disadvantaged communities all over this country who are
communities of color and disadvantaged communities. Not one time did she say Black Americans. And some of you may say, well, she did say people of color. Well, people of color is a broad term that it can encompass everybody except white people. And I want you to think about all the people that's in this country. We have Middle Eastern people. We have Indian people, Asian people. We have Caribbean people, people who are born in the continent of Africa. Okay, we have people from Iran, Iraq, Cuba, Kuwait, all over the world. We have Australians in America. So they may not consider themselves white. Oh, well, you know, my father did have 2% Aboriginal blood, so I'm not technically white. So she's encompassing everybody. I just want to point out some of the trick language, family, and believe me, when some of you people, oh, they're just using key popular terms for people to understand. No. You know when someone's talking about being a Black American, you automatically know when they're talking to you. When they talk about people of color, then most likely you're thinking about Black people and Mexican people. But that's not it, family. They're talking about everybody that doesn't consider themselves white. That is all. That is all. So they're encompassing everybody. And when it comes to underserved communities, that's any community. They have poor Asian communities, poor Hispanic communities, poor white communities. So now we're encompassing every group in America, even white people, simply because you said underserved communities. Have you guys ever been to a trailer park? Have you seen those white communities? I'm just asking questions.
We're suffering from environmental injustice. I assure you, I lived in Grosse Pointe. What happened in Flint would not have happened in Grosse Pointe. This is part of the dark underbelly of American society. The racism, the bigotry, and the entire conversation that we're having here tonight, if you think any of this wonkiness is going to deal with this dark psychic force of the collectivized hatred that this president is bringing up in this country, then I'm afraid that the Democrats are going to see some very dark days. We need to say it like it is. It's bigger than Flint. It's all over this country. It's particularly people of color. It's particularly people who do not have the money to fight back. And if the Democrats don't start saying it, then why would those people feel that they're there for us? And if those people don't feel it, they won't vote for us, and Donald Trump will win.
So, which you're getting a lot of showmanship. She's moving around a lot.
Some deep truth telling. We need to recognize that when it comes to the economic gap between blacks and whites in America, it does come from a great injustice that has never been dealt with. That great injustice has had to do with the fact that there was 250 years of slavery, followed by another 100 years of domestic terrorism. What makes me qualified to say $200 to $500 billion? I'll tell you what makes me qualified. If you did the math of the 40 acres and a mule, given that there was 4 to 5 million slaves at the end of the Civil War, there were 4 to 5, and they were all promised 40 acres and a mule for every family of 4. If you did the math today, it would be trillions of dollars. And I believe that anything less than $100 billion is an insult, and I believe that 200 to 500 billion is politically feasible today because so many Americans realize there is an injustice that continues to form a toxicity underneath the surface, an emotional turbulence that only reparations.
Thank you very much. So let's get into this because she said a lot and she had a lot of energy and she was saying some key terms and key words, and automatically a lot of people just jumped on it like she's for reparations, she's for black people. And so a lot of people in the empowerment space, we have to define, we have to research, we have to be very analytical, but we have to understand that the words that people speak. So let's go through it very quickly. First and foremost, in the first part of her paragraph, under her title, she said, descendants of enslaved people. Family, descendants of enslaved people. Have you ever heard of Native Americans stating that their people were enslaved? Have you ever heard of Irish people stating that their people were enslaved in America? Have you ever heard Mexican people say that their ancestors was enslaved in America? Have you ever heard the Italians say that their people were enslaved in America? Guess what, family? I have. So there's no designation when you say descendants of enslaved people. Automatically, you're like, brother, who else could she be talking about? I just ran down a whole laundry list of other groups that she can be talking about. Guess who also comes into play? Asians as well. Let's move on. I'm going to run through some of these I'm going to read. She said, I do not believe the average American is a racist, but I believe the average American is uneducated about the history of race in America. When our history is viewed through a clear lens, historically, economically, and morally, white America is seen on a debt to descendants of enslaved people. She said she didn't say the descendants of Black Americans who were enslaved in this country. There's etymology to words and the positioning of those words and the arrangement of those words that make things action and not just describing or encompassing other people. That's what I'm getting at. She also states here, this is why I support and have a plan for a program of reparations to descendants of American enslaved people. Again, she continues to say the descendants of American enslaved people instead of saying Black Americans, melanated freedmen, foundational Black Americans. She's not even using any key terms. She continues to encompass other groups that you guys may not be aware of, as I stated before. Now, she said slavery existed in America from 1619 until 1865. Now, if you're in the foundational Black American space, you know that the first enslaved Africans came to this country in 1526. So again, the country wasn't formulated until what, 1775, 1776. So when people say, well, 1619 is a more accurate age because America was a country, then no, it was not. Let me move on. That was followed by another 100 years of institutional violence against Blacks in the form of Black Code law, segregation, lynching, the KKK, and other forms of private and public horror. All in all, there were 350 years of institutional violence amongst committed against a people who had been brought to this country against their will, then sold as slaves for purposes of building the American economy. Again, family, you're going to have people to describe the position. You're going to have people to describe the conditions and all those details that happened during that time. But the major problem is there's no designation of the people she is actually referring to. Now, Joe Biden came out with a plan, and he called it, was it Kamala, the Lift Every Voice plan or something like that? Again, racial tropes to encompass Black people to vote Democrat over and over again. Now, I just want to point out something very quickly here that she stated the descendants of enslaved people. She didn't even say Black people. If you notice, when she describes certain events and certain horrors within America, she may say the word Black. But other than that, she keeps continuing to say descendants of enslaved people. And family, what we have known when we break these things down, and we see they don't mention Black Americans, right? They don't use any key terms that we use to identify ourselves, because we have long passed the term African American. Because here's the thing, family, there were slaves that were taken to Jamaica. Do you ever hear Jamaican stating that I am African Jamaican? There were slaves taken to the UK. Do you ever hear them state that I am African British or African whatever? Maybe they say some other terms, but you don't hear anyone saying I am African Barbados. This is what I'm talking about. We're the only group, with maybe some from the UK in the diaspora, that is using the term African. And for us to have our own designation as our own tribe, as other people from the country they are from uses, then that's why a lot of people within the space are talking about using the term foundational Black Americans. It's not a group, it's not a club, it's not a gang. It's a lineage. It's a designation on lineage. Because our ancestors have been the foundation of this country, then we designate that we are Black and we're also Americans, because we were here even before the establishment of the dominant society's government. Let me move on. It states right here, at the time when enslaved people were first emancipated at the end of the Civil War, there are estimated to have between 4 to 5 million enslaved persons in the American South. They keep saying enslaved persons. They're not saying Black people. You see what I'm saying, family? At least when some people lie to us, they at least say Black people. Or they might even say people of color, which includes Black people, but not at the same percentage and rate as other groups who are of a lighter tone than Black people, like Asians and Hispanics. That's just the truth. Well, at least mine. But here's the point I'm trying to make. She keeps stating enslaved people. It says here that General Sherman posed to every former enslaved family, 44 acres and a mule, while this would have provided a way to make a living and feeds one family, integrating economically into life as a free citizen. Only a few actually received the acreage, and among those who received it, most had it taken away. And then, of course, you use some of our leaders, as Martin Luther King Jr., so on and so forth. States about the Civil War before the Civil Rights Act was passed in 1964 to dismantle segregation, and only in 1965 did the Voting Act ensure equal access to Black people at the polls. Now that she's describing a time, remember I told you this at the beginning, she's not saying enslaved people or descendants of enslaved people. When she's talking about that, now she's describing Black people, right? Because they don't believe you guys are going to go down this and really analyze every word. And anytime we got these white or Black or blue or green presidential candidates that's coming to the Black community and they say, oh, we're going to fight for you for reparations, and then you start to read their policies and plans on their website, you're like, whoa, wait a minute here. Enslaved people, why you're not using Black Americans? Hold up, what do you mean when I hear you talking? Because she wants to encompass every people, as we stated before, family. She's talking about people of color in underserved communities. Underserved communities. You guys know poor white people. You may not know any poor Asian people in America, but I'm pretty sure there's some. She says, I have advocated for the broad-scale reparations for slavery since the 1990s, which she has. But family, you and I just don't know who the hell she's advocating for reparations for, because she keeps saying enslaved people. And when she speaks in public forums, she's saying people of color in underserved communities. Well, God damn it, Marianne, that's everybody in America. It amazes me how every other group gets reparations. Even Jewish Americans or those survivors from the Jewish Holocaust receive a form of reparations here in America by earmark money going back to President Barack Obama. I have nothing against them getting money from any government for what their people have been through, but our people have been long overdue reparations. And then Obama started explaining, talking about I really couldn't do anything for Black people because of white guilt. I'm like, Negro, please. You had 8 years in the presidency. You could have went out with a bang for your people. And you would have said, have all your presidential trinkets and protections and money. It probably would have hurt a book deal. That's about it. But you still would have been a very rich man. You still would have been a very powerful man. You still would have been protected by this government. But you decided to sell out Barack Obama. That's okay. That's okay. We kind of knew that after the second term, we didn't do nothing for Black Americans. But we were so goddamn happy that she was in the office because we saw a Black man in the most racist country in the world. We were just happy. Yeah. Look, he looks good up there. He's Black. Yeah. It didn't get us anywhere, family. While America has moved forward in many ways since the days of slavery and Jim Crow, here she goes describing our conditions and our history. In other ways, as a nation, we are slipping backwards. Mass incarceration, racial disparity, criminal sentencing, blah, 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 blah. Police brutality often focuses on Black populations. She's using Black now, family, because again, as she describes some of these horrors and the debauchery that the white supremacists put on our ancestors, you see that she's using the word Black. But when we start talking about reparations, she goes right back to enslaved people and family. This is posted on the website. That means that they went over this information 10, 20, 30 times before they posted on this website. She goes over and says, moreover, the gap in earning potential between Blacks and white is left over a profound economic injustice that has never been fully addressed and in many ways continues to exist. Yeah, we know this, Marianne. We know this. Yeah. I don't know what you're stating here. I'm skipping down here to the bottom. She says reparations are not financial assistance. They are payments of a debt that has never been paid. Thus, they pave the way for an emotional and psychological healing between Blacks and whites much needed in the United States. Family, okay, again, she's kind of using the word black, but never when she's talking about reparations. And here we go again. This is a term that encompasses everybody. Access to quality education in underserved communities, environmental injustice within black neighborhoods. No. Access to quality education in underserved communities. That's everybody. Black people are not the only poor people in America. So again, she's just describing a problem. And when it comes to anything tangible, she's using trick language, family. White America is seen on a debt to the descendants of enslaved people. And we went over this time and time again. And as I was stating before, fam, we have to understand that slavery in America, and I'm just going to hit a couple of links here for you, started back in 1526. And this is by PBS. Because the first North American slave revolt was in 1526. So you had to have slaves on land to have a revolt. So that's another thing that we understand. So technically, there was already slaves there was already slaves and melanated people already on the land, right? And then we go to 1527, the first Muslim in North America, so on and so forth, right? Let me show you another link. Why is 1526 is a deserving of commemoration as 1619? And then goes on to give you the story of those Spanish conquistadors that came here with 100 slaves or more, right? Let's do one more. The first recorded African slaves arrived in the United States of America, 1526. All right. And then you have people like Stacey Abrams. Oh, boy. We're going to see how these people are going to shift. And the Foundation of Black American Family, U.S. Freedmen Family, those Black Americans, we understand that sellouts like Stacey Abrams, she's going to jump on the bandwagon of the movement, of the energy of the people. Because what's going to happen is, I believe, okay, I'm not too quite sure, but I believe that Marianne Williamson will get some traction because of a reparations claim. Because we have a white candidate that's speaking out and boldly about reparations. But family, this is a trick bag unless she changed the language. And guess what else I would like to see? What about an executive order? Right? No. On this webpage, first of all, change this language. Let's use U.S. Black Freedmen or Foundation of Black Americans. Let's do something that's a designation for our people, right? Then I want you to say, I will sign an executive order of $1 trillion to be dispersed. And as she stated on her website, because she has some other things here, family. Let me go back a little bit here. Let's go right before here. She says here, according to my plan, reparations for slavery will be paid in the amount of a minimum of $1 trillion. She goes on to say these payments will be made over a period of 20 years to a reparations council made up of Black leaders from across the spectrum of American academic. No, Marianne. No goddamn Black leaders. Black American leaders who descendancy and ancestry is in this country. Because family, if we look at the Congressional Coon Caucus or the Congressional Black Caucus as you know them, or the Congressional Black Talkers, then we will understand that we have people whose lineage doesn't derive from this America. They're from all over the Caribbean and as well the African continent, that their history does not share the same history as well as Jim Crow and modern day oppression and suppression of our people. We don't share the same history, so they're not going to understand. So a lot of this money, let's make a educational fund for those descendants of Black Americans here. No, family, just cut the check. And we're all to receive $400,000. Cut the check. I can use the $400,000 and go to school with that. I don't need you to grant me school or free school. No, no, no. Give me the money. I can go do it myself. Well, we gotta make sure we just don't give them the money because they're gonna go buy rims and pocketbooks and shoes and purses. And when they give the Native Americans reparations each and every year, that's part of the fiscal and federal and yearly budget, you don't see them restraining on the funds. When they gave millions of dollars to the Jewish Holocaust survivors, you didn't see them restraining on the funds. But this is how we get treated in this America. And we need to understand how they do things, family, in order for us not to get what is owed to us. It states here the council would include 30 to 50 members, all descendants of enslaved people. There it goes again. There it goes again. See, family, first you're going to make up the council of Black leaders, not Black American leaders, right? Black leaders. They can be from any country as long as they Black. And we know how that's been working out for us, like Candace Owen, Jesse Lee Peterson, Roland Martin, etc. We see how that's been doing with us, right? The descendants of enslaved people. We're using that word again. You just used the word Black prior to. Why are we now interchanging the words? Because we're talking about another thing. Because now we're just talking about descendants of enslaved people, not Black American descendants of enslaved people. This council, note, the American government will determine how the money is to be dispersed. Sounds good. The council will determine how the money is dispersed and not the American government. But family, let me tell you, if you have a lot of immigrants who lineage is not from this country, they're not going to understand. They're like, well, black people, we here need a lot of education. So instead of just giving them money, we're going to determine that every Black person will be going to school free with this money. They're going to determine it for you. Where the people have been beating the drum and stating, cut the check, cash payment. That's the first thing. We're going to worry about everything else later on, from all these businesses, all these banks who was a part of slavery, who granted the slave owners loans. Yeah. We're going to handle all that later, but cut the check right now, because our people in dire need of the money that is owed to them. And I don't care what nobody else has said. Boy, they hate when somebody from their society comes out and talk about reparations, but look like she's throwing the trick bag. She's using trick language and she keep changing it. And I'm gonna tell you this, man, a broken clock is right twice of the day. So she's using all type of tactics and strategies, and even in her wording, because she's gonna go back and she said, well, I never said Black American descendant of slaves, because there's a claim for Jamaicans, there's a claim for some Africans, there's a claim from Irish, there's some claims from Jewish to some degree, there's a claim of Italians and Irish and Native Americans. So everybody. So if she did $1 trillion, family might be ending, your reparations may end up being $10. Your reparations may end up being $10. Let me give a shout out to you guys real quick. Jermaine Anderson, B1 to you as well, family. Brent C, Red Wine Entertainment. Nice to see you again, sister. See you back. Just got back in town on Thursday night from South Africa. Okay, I see JD Informant, Wendell. I see all you brothers and sisters in here. Nice to see you. I see your comments on here. All right, we got Aaron Carson. Let me move on. The stipulation of the part of American government is the following: that the money be applied for purposes of economic and educational renewal. The reparations plan will not erase the history of slavery in America. Well, no shit. Nor of its ugly aftermath. It's only part of a multi-dimensional healing process, but it will go far toward ending a painful, horrific chapter in American history, and will give future generations of Americans a chance to begin on the high ground of reconciliation. I have no idea what the hell Marianne Williamson is talking about. And if you were to ask me, is she a valuable candidate for Black Americans for reparations or any support? My answer is no. You get a no from me. It looks like I'm going to continue to holding the only power the only influence that I believe Black Americans have, and that's your vote. That's your vote. Stop giving away your vote. Your vote is your money, family. Your vote is your money, family. It's the only ticket that you have of putting political pressure on these pundits, these candidates that say they're for our people. Because behind closed doors, they're making deals with Asians, they're making deals with whites, they're even making deals with Hispanics. But they understand that they need an underclass. They need a criminal class. And as long as we at the bottom, then everybody else is on top. They don't want us to be equal to anyone. They don't want to decrease the wealth gap. So they throw all these tactics at us. Start speaking our language. Start labeling things in a certain manner. And we continue to fall for it over and over and over again. Some are like, well, at least she's talking about it. It means nothing to us. We're tired of empty promises. We're tired of people just talking the talk. Action needs to happen, family. And you should be teaching and mentoring your family who doesn't understand the tactics that the dominant and white supremacy society do in order to gain our vote, because they know if they gain the Black vote, they will become president. So don't just treat your vote like an obligation. Do not treat your vote like an obligation, like you just have to vote, like your ancestors died for you to vote. Your ancestors bled for and died for you to have a choice. And if we keep giving away our vote to political candidates that don't speak up for us, but they behind closed doors make all these policies, sign all these executive orders for all these other racial groups here in America, because we want to be kumbaya. All these other groups are not kumbaya with this, family. And they're receiving all sorts of benefits from this U.S. government. And just like any other Black empowerment channel you guys seen, that we give you a laundry list of all the things that they've done for other groups except for our people. So when are we going to stop being fooled, bamboozled, and tricked and manipulated like the stupid people they think we are in the first place? And we know we ain't stupid. We're some of the most intelligent people on earth, but we've been told differently. But you know what you are. So let's stop falling for the trick language. Let's stop falling for the trick bag and actually empower ourselves and use what we have that's given to us by our forefathers, and wait until someone actually comes up and starts speaking the truth with action, instead of just describing a situation and you start encompassing everybody. And believe me, when you're on the bottom and they add everyone else, mathematically, you're still on the bottom.